How's it going, Steve? No, it's all fine, man. Great to talk to you today.
I got to see, what the world's waiting for. Not enough, but some of Lightyear, and it's absolutely incredible. It's so beautiful and so detailed. It's kind of fresh yet familiar. My first question for you is, how stressful is it taking on a beloved character like Buzz?
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely, especially early on, right? Early on when you don't know anything, it's like I almost can forget now that there was this big phase of like we didn't, know what the movie was going to look like or what Buzz was going to look like, right? And finding that early on is kind of probably the most like anxiety-inducing process, even though it's a lot of fun too. Because I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, we're all getting paid to like sit here and draw, Buzz Lightyear in spaceships and space bases and all that kind of stuff. But it is still one of those things where finding the thread of the angle of the look and the story and all that stuff when you don't know what it is definitely tough and a big challenge. But then once you arrive there are their own challenges, of course, like, kind of working out the specific designs. But at that point, you kind of have like this North Star that you can kind of follow, and everybody kind of knows what they're making. Arriving at that point is the big journey.
So were you a fan of sci-fi growing up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So like sci-fi, I was also, just kind of I was growing up in that era, like right after the 80s, right? Where it's like Star Wars special editions were coming out. And that was my introduction to Star Wars, right? You also had, Jurassic Park, and you had, like all of those kind of blockbusters from like late 80s into the early 90s. That was kind of my sweet spot. And then I was also always a big animation nerd. So like when Toy Story came out, like that was something that was mind blowing. And of course, never would have considered that I'd be working here or like, adapting Buzz Lightyear into its own film. As I grew older, like I kind of, my passion for animation, but also kind of like the mature sci-fi stuff. Like I found anime, and I found that to be really interesting because it's like much more mature style of animation. So like sci-fi there, like Cowboy Bebop was one of my favorite shows when I was kind of in those high school years. So like big machines, spaceships, anything that's kind of technological, whether it's in live action or animation, has always been something that, has been exciting and something I'm passionate about. And so, yeah, sci-fi films have always been some way up there as like favorite influences.
It's got to be a dream having the opportunity to now, like all that research you did for all those years, you didn't realize you're doing
yeah
research,
right. Yeah, it just kind of like, because that's stuff that like a lot of the folks that kind of got brought on this movie were just known as being geeks for that stuff. And so of course you want folks who working on this movie that kind of know what's come before and just love that kind of stuff. And so many people here love that stuff. I mean, who doesn't? So yeah, it was a blast.
Yeah, it comes across. And also what comes across are those influences, some of those films you mentioned. Yeah. The Jurassic Park is one of that. I really, after you said it, I'm like, oh yeah. But there's like there's kind of a mix between the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, some Star Trek 2001, and a lot of the toys that I had growing up as a kid. It feels like that, which is great. What were some of your goals for building the human aspects of this world?
I mean, one of the big goals for me, being a guy that is inspired by machinery, technology, vehicles, like robots, all that stuff, I really wanted a sense of mechanical reality to our world, right? I love, like, okay, you take the launch sequence, for instance, of the XL1, right? And there are all these amazing, like, little elements and details that, myself and my team wanted to layer in there. And that Angus, as a director, loves this stuff too. He loves, like, cool technology that moves and things that operate. And so you have the crawler vehicle that launches the ship. It's this big rail-mounted sled, essentially. And it's got these giant brake pawls that kind of grasp the ship and then release, when it starts to move towards, the launch pad. And then when it gets there, it has this giant armature that articulates, and all these things are spinning and pistons are moving, and all the stuff that I wanted to make work and functional, right? Because in CG, you can just cheat a lot of things and just make it happen. But for me, being somebody that geeks out about the reality of those those machines in real life, and that they have a purpose and they function, right? And when you see them working, you have this sense of awe and excitement and scale to it. And I really wanted, like, this was a very appropriate movie to be able to celebrate like mechanics and the cool things operating. And then in addition to just, being cool, it just adds this depth to the world and a reality to it and a bigness to it that just, for me, is a personal thing that really excites me. And we had a director that was really into that. So I really enjoyed that.
One thing you mentioned that stood out for me was the scale. There was a documentary recently. They had old footage of the Apollo mission, I believe it was. And you didn't realize until you saw that just how massive these space vehicles and all that is. And that came across here as well.
Yeah, it's like, well, with the launching of the Saturn V, right? You look at close-ups of, like, you know, at the bottom they have, you know, they have the little clamps that are actually holding the rocket to the launch pad and release just as the engines are igniting, right? And then, of course, you have all of the hoses and stuff that are kind of disengaging, and they're spewing particulate, and the ice is falling off of the, you know, the ship, and things are moving out of the way as this massive 360-foot tall rocket takes off. I mean, it's all of this. It's a mechanical choreography, right? That is something that I think is just so beautiful and impressive to watch, and I wanted that in there.
Yeah, that's incredible. And what's some of the process of bringing this from the script, like your collaborations for bringing this from a script to where it is today?
I mean, the movie is always changing, right? It's like the story is, you know, in any film, it's always in flux as kind of the director and the story team are figuring out what they want to tell, what the core of the, you know, the tale that they're weaving, and then just finding ways to plus moments or remove things and add things that kind of heighten the excitement and the interest and the feelings, right? And so, of course, we are always having to kind of, you know, walk and chew gum at the same time, where it's like we're building this world and we're also having story changes that will come along and we'll have to adapt to, right? And so that's a big part of my job, is like I'm often not involved, of course, in the actual, you know, development of script or moments, although we do pitch stuff out there, like, you know, times when we can use a certain set for a certain moment that might be cool or whatever. But largely, we're also kind of like adapting to the decisions that story is making, that Angus is kind of, you know, editing with the movie. And yeah, it's a challenge for sure. It's a moving target that you're always trying to hit, and trying to just make everything the best it can be.
Which was more difficult, creating the sci-fi aspect of it, or the, well, I guess, you know, the mechanical, or the environment, like the more organic environment?
The mechanical element of it is because that's where my brain is. Like, I love that stuff. That was, even though there's way more of that in our movie, but that's the stuff that I've just like, I'm excited to like figure out and you know, discover, and like that stuff was like comparatively easier. The world outside, you know, the organic world, was one that was, we went through a lot of iterations on what it needed to be and what it wanted to be. And like, there are basic story needs that we need to hit with it, right? The top down, like, you know, kind of directive for Takani Prime is that it needs to be a planet that it kind of sucks to be stuck on, right? It's like it's habitable, which is a great thing, obviously, right? But it's also filled with vines that want to drag you off into the jungle, and bugs that want to eat you, and all this stuff. And so it needs to represent, like, because if it was just paradise, it was like Cancun or something like that, it'd be like, oh, I guess it's not such a bad thing that we're stuck here. But it needs to be a place where people want to leave, right? And then it's kind of figuring out, okay, like, everything in our world is very kind of like, start with what is the need and the function that this world or this vehicle needs to fill, and then what's a design that supports that, right? And so that's very much where we approached Iconic Prime. But that was very much kind of like a very fluid thing, where we went through many different iterations on that before we arrived on the ultimate, you know, kind of look that we came for the movie.
Well, I want to thank you for your time. I'm really looking forward to seeing the rest of Lightyear, and best of luck with it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephen. This was a blast talking with you, man.
Have a great day. Thank you.
All right, you too, man. Take care.